What an incredible privilege to be here with you this morning. And as June says, it feels quite at home with the weather, except that in Klaipeda right now we've got lots of snow and it is blowing and a little insane. Let's get this clear from the beginning. I'm weird. Here's the deal, and you can sort of keep your hand on your lap and count with your fingers as I go through this list and see how you compare to my weirdness. Everything I'm now going to list for you is a different country. The country of my birth, the country of my citizenship, the country where I went to high school and graduated from high school, the country where I have all of my post-high school degrees, BA, MA, PhD, and the beginning of my professional career, and the country where I live now. Those are 5 countries on 3 continents. So, I was born in Montevideo, Uruguay. I am a citizen of Canada. I went to high school in Asunción, Paraguay. All of my degrees and my beginning of my professional career was in the United States. And I've now lived in Lithuania for 17 years. So in fact, the country where I've lived the longest of my life is not my passport country. And the country of my passport, I have no address there. I'm totally weird. But more important than all of that is the fact that I'm a citizen of heaven. I'm a child of the King. And because of that, I am a hope carrier. And I am the hands and feet of Christ in the world. In fact, we all are. Everyone who claims to be a Christ follower is, in fact, a hope carrier, and is, in fact, a person who is the hands and feet of Christ. So, if you were here last night listening to Nikki talking about reminders from Isaiah 58, we are all people who are called to do. To feed the poor, to clothe the naked, to house those who have no shelter. Because those things don't actually fall down from God, from the sky, wherever our vision of God is. God can't make clothes just fall from the clouds. It is through His hands and feet that happens. And we are that to the world. We have a task. We are actors in His kingdom work. We are His hands and feet, whether we are students or accountants or moms or grocery store clerks or lawyers or friends or neighbors. We are His hands and feet. We are hope carriers. For He who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. That's what this conference is about. We're here encouraging each other as the hands and feet of Christ, as the hope carriers. How exciting that is. My hands and feet role and my hope carrying role happens to take place in Lithuania at LCC International University. LCC is one example of many educational institutions around the world where hope carriers are busy at work. So I would like to tell you a little bit about how and why many thousands, and I say thousands literally, of hope carriers have served at this university. You may remember that in 1989, August 23rd, it wasn't the big news of the world, but it was a major event. August 23rd, 1989, 2 million people held hands in an unbroken line from the capital of Lithuania to the capital of Latvia to the capital of Estonia, which is 600 kilometers. 2 million people holding hands at exactly the same time, unbroken, as a statement of resistance against the communist regime of the Soviet Union. Can you imagine even organizing that before cell phones and email and, like, unbelievable. What an incredible statement of hope. They knew something was changing, and they knew the world for them was going to be different. No violence. 1992 is another statement of hope. This time, through the very interesting world of basketball. Now, if you know anything about Lithuania, you know that the religion of the country is basketball. And the Soviet team at the Olympics for the 50 years of the Soviet Union, it was a Lithuanian team, but they weren't called Lithuania because it was the Soviet Union. So, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and Lithuania for the first time could play under their own flag, they went to the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona, and they played against the Dream Team from the United States. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, all the big names from that era. And dear humble little Lithuania won the bronze medal. They are called the other Dream Team because that was the Dream Team where the other ones. You can see that from the picture, they were wearing tie-dyed uniforms because they had no money, and somehow the Grateful Dead heard about this, and the Grateful Dead bought their uniforms. Seriously, who can argue with that kind of a history? But again, so much hope being able to play under their own flag as a newly re-established independent country. 1989, huge hope. 1992, huge hope. And right smack in the middle of that, in 1991, this thing called LCC began. It didn't even have a name back then. It was a summer language institute in the Soviet Union. I was there. Let's pretend I was 3. But literally February, we're now in February, so literally 28 years ago this month, I had a message on my voice message machine, whatever that was called back then, and that the message was, do you want to teach English in the Soviet Union this summer? Oh, wow, the enemy country, like I could check this off the bucket list and everybody would be jealous because who goes to the Soviet Union? I said, sure. So I was there that very first summer when LCC was born, into this context of hope. And if you remember your history, you know that the summer of 1991 is the summer when the Soviet Union collapsed. In fact, it was August 19th of 1991, on a Monday, and our group had just finished teaching in Lithuania, and we were now in Leningrad, which was called Leningrad, not St. Petersburg yet. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, people were running up and down the halls of our hotel screaming in Russian. And we thought, oh, this doesn't sound good, but we don't have any idea what it is. And our interpreter said, this is the Civil War, and I have to get my family out of the country. And we thought, no, please don't leave us. We don't know what's happening. And it all ended that the very next day, August 20th, 1991, we went to Moscow, and we arrived to tanks moving in the streets. So just to end this segment of the story, because we're not going to get stuck in 91, I just want to prove that I'm not lying. This is me with the black and white stripes, sitting on a tank in Red Square, August 21st, 1991. Wow. It was 20 seconds worth of a photo opportunity, but other people were doing it, so we thought we should as well. You know how that is. If you don't have a photo, it didn't happen. So, what was that adventure, going to the enemy country and checking it off the bucket list? Everything changed right here. All of those students that I had that were so passionate about independence and about freedom to even read the Bible, I knew that they now had that independence. And now, my once-in-a-lifetime adventure was the first summer of many summers to follow. I was back the very next summer. I was there multiple summers in the 90s, and by 2002, I was invited to return to Lithuania full-time, where I have now lived for 17 years. But if we want to fast forward from that hope-filled beginning, let's look at the realities of today. Suicide rate per capita in the world puts Lithuania at the top. The suicide rate in Lithuania is very high. And it is not young people, although there are those as well, but in many cases it's middle-aged men who could not make the transition from a communist regime to a free market economy. How do you retrain to have a customer service orientation when that's never been your deal before? All of these countries listed here are countries of the students of LCC. Suicide does not sound hopeful. Alcohol consumption, very high in that part of the world. All of these countries are countries where we have students at LCC. That's not hopefulness. That's how you mask the lack of it. So, LCC is a tiny school in a really tiny country in a monster-sized region called the former Soviet Union. This is all blurry from close up. We are here on the Baltic Sea, so literally 1 kilometer from LCC, you can see the Baltic Sea. And in case you want to know, the sand is the second best quality sand in the world. Cold weather, yes, but sand is anything. But if you think about all of this as the former Soviet Union, that region is twice as big as the United States. That is twice as big as the United States, and LCC is the only Christian liberal arts university in the entire area. So let's put that into North American context. We are the Westmont, let's say, of a region that is twice as big as the United States. So is Westmont important? Oh, sure it's important. But you know what? If Westmont died tomorrow, which we pray it will never do, there are 200 plus other schools that are also options if people want Christian liberal arts education in this country. But LCC is the only one in a region twice as big as this country. Are we important? We believe we have a ministry and a mission in that part of the world, a ministry and mission of hope. Let's look at who we are. Here's LCC. Today we are a fully accredited university. Our diplomas are good anywhere in the world. You can graduate from LCC and go to master's degree programs at UCLA if you want to. We have 600 students from many countries, in fact, more than 43 countries. The interesting thing about that 43 countries is not that we have one from every country, because lots of schools can say that, but 68% of our student body is from outside of the country we exist in. So only 32% of our students come from Lithuania, and 68% come from all over the world. Well, primarily the region around us, but scattered much beyond that as well. In fact, we have, I believe, students now from every country in the former Soviet Union, which means we have students from countries that you and I cannot get to go and work, and certainly not to go and share Christ in any overt way. But we have those students on our campus who are then hope carriers back to their home countries and making a difference there. We also have students from North America, and so we do have students who are amazing examples of what it means to be a Christ follower at a university, and they come to our campus and spend a semester, and we are so grateful for that. So we have, in the early days, we were Lithuania, then we expanded to sort of the broader eastern world of the former Soviet Union, and more recently we have now broadened our footprint to include the Middle East. And so we now have, well, let me just, Russia, Georgia, Albania, Armenia, Moldova, Macedonia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Santa Barbara Stan, Syria, Iraq, and I think that ends my little picture. That's not 43, that's just samples of some of our countries. But we have expanded recently into the Middle East because and I said Westmont because we do have Westmont City too. Oh, okay, this Middle East thing. The other day I was signing one of my thousands of stacks of papers that I have to sign for the registrar's office. Who else in the world has signed acceptance letters for students from Nineveh and Damascus? Oh my word, like I was in the Bible. Unbelievable, unbelievable to think of the reach of our humble little school in Lithuania that now has expanded into this part of I was going to show us, I'll show you some Middle East stuff in a minute. Yeah, okay. What I want to share though is that truly what we're all about is hospitality. And hospitality, the way that Henry Nouwen defines it, I love his definition. And he says that hospitality is the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend. Now he usually adds, and sometimes it requires an articulate not knowing. Don't you love that phrase? An articulate not knowing? Like you just have to shut up as the host. Because if the stranger is going to become a friend, you have to listen to the stranger. And so this is a kind of hospitality, he continues, that is intended not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place. That is the kind of hospitality that I believe we as Christ followers, as hope carriers, are called to. And just because I wanted to show you a fun picture of food that looks so different than anything in North America, yes, hospitality can also be involving food. This happens to be cold beet soup, which is, to die for, amazing. It looks like Pepto-Bismol, it's true, but it is really delicious. But hospitality comes in many forms when you actually let it. So, here's a basketball game in our gym. Basketball. Remember I said basketball was the religion of the country. Perfect. Do you know that there is no university in the entire country of Lithuania that would ever have that many people at a game? And do you want to know why? Basketball is corrupt. Think about if you have a team that's called, what is it, UCSB, and nobody on the team actually is a student at UCSB. They're all poached from professional teams around the area. They're given a student card in the parking lot. They come onto the floor and they play basketball, and nobody comes to watch them because they are not in classes with their students, with their fellow classmates. They're not in the dorms, the residence halls. Nobody knows them. This is what's happening in Lithuania. So one day the coach told me, just so you know, the team we're playing tonight, the sum total of their salaries on the opposing team is 350,000 euros. It's corrupt. Our students come because they know the players on the court. This seems like such a tiny little thing, but it is a message of hospitality, and it's a message of integrity and ethical values. We have student athletes. Now, not that you can actually see this in detail, but there are 3 sections of bleachers, and there's nobody sitting in this section, if you can see that. There's little white pieces of paper that you can see. Each of those white pieces of paper is on an empty backpack. And the white pieces of paper is the first name of a person who committed suicide last year in Lithuania. So as the people came into the game, all the fans, they had to walk in through this door. They had to walk past police tape. They didn't know why. And then they had to come sit here. And then at halftime, we had a Celebrate Life message as an anti-suicide awareness campaign. Whether your student council presidents would have such diversity as these. This happens to be the last 3 student council presidents. This young man is now a graduate. He's from Belarus. He's the current student council president. He's from Ukraine. He's the former student council president. He's from Kazakhstan. The most delightful Christian who now works at the Kazakhstan embassy in the capital city. I could tell stories, I won't go on. We've celebrated 25 years plus. We celebrate a lot with all our flags. We are truly an international community. We welcome our students, our freshmen from many countries, and it is not by accident that they come to LCC. We are on the road everywhere to go and recruit them and find them, and to find the right kind of student for LCC, the kind with leadership potential, not with a bag full of money. Because just in case you want to compare, and I don't know how many of you know Westmont, tuition, even public institutions here, our tuition for a whole year is $4,000, and nobody can afford it. So we're not there for the rich kids. We're there for the future leaders. And that is an important part of how we recruit our students. We are a campus that is a place of hospitality for critical conversations. This happens to be a faith leaders conversation. Interesting, I'm sure, would be that this man here is actually a Baptist pastor. He is a Baptist pastor in the country of Georgia. This man is a Yazidi leader from Iraq. And this is our student who is a Syrian Christian. And so we have faith conversations. We are a place that welcomes all faith traditions, although we are intentionally Christ-centered. And so while we have these conversations, we come from that perspective of being a place where Christ is central. But we have many kinds of conversations. Just recently, we've had a leader of the anti-corruption nonprofit work in the country of Ukraine who works at the government level to work against corruption in Ukraine. Now, we could go on forever about how much corruption actually exists in the country of Ukraine. Pray for their elections on March 31st. Human trafficking. We've recently had a sergeant from the Montreal Police sex trafficking unit come to campus. You think about the countries where our young women are from. Moldova is one of the highest human trafficking source countries. And so for us to have that kind of a critical conversation on a campus where the students themselves could be vulnerable to these issues is a huge, huge privilege. Trust as social glue. We've recently had a leader from the Nordic Council from Denmark come and talk about trust. Think about 50 years of the communist world of the Soviet Union, where trust was absolutely erased from the fabric of society. And now how do you build that back? You couldn't trust your brother. You couldn't trust your neighbor. And now, oh, just trust each other. Oh, we'll get some new policies and some new laws in the country and everybody. How does that happen? How do you build trust as social glue? I recently was in the capital city of Vilnius, and I had the privilege of meeting the new Canadian ambassador. And at that reception, I met the head of the Canadian NATO delegation. Now, this was cool. All the military, had NATO on the slide, and it was all fun. And so I was telling him about LCC, and he was speechless. He said, "You're doing the work of NATO." And he said, "You see that guy in uniform across the room?" He said, "Yes." "Well, that's the head of all the NATO delegation for all the Baltics. He's from Denmark. You need to go talk to him." So he and I went over to talk to him. And I explained LCC. And then he said, "Tell him the flag story." Tell him the flag story. So, I'm going to save the flag story, but I'm going to tell you the flag story in a minute. These are the kinds of critical conversations that LCC is privileged to be part of, and that make a difference for that part of the world. Our students are beginning to understand that value. Here's a group of young women from 8 countries who have established a scholarship fund that now has a little more than $400, and they are proud of that, towards a future scholarship for a needy young woman. They're talking about women's empowerment in countries where it is a disastrous world of no empowerment for women. But it's a student-led initiative now because of something they heard at a Global Leadership Summit that we host at LCC. This is a picture that I took in a Yazidi camp in Iraq 2 years ago. This is where we get students from. We have students from exactly that camp. We need to go to those places and identify trusted agencies and church groups that can refer students to us, so that when we get the students, we know that they're not, ISIS in a different colored clothing. So we have students like Zina. Zina is a Yazidi young woman from Sinjar, Iraq. If you remember, in August of 2014, ISIS attacked the Yazidi people and pushed them all up Mount Sinjar and left them at the top of the mountain to die. Zina was there, and she escaped, and she became a student at LCC. As a student at LCC, she shared her photos of living in camps in Italy at the invitation of the Prime Minister of Italy, at the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and last summer she was part of a Young Global Leaders program that took her to Washington, D.C. What a privilege to walk alongside of her in her journey now to sharing her story. This young man, which I showed in the previous picture as well, is a Syrian Christian, Milad. He started his education at the University of Aleppo. Aleppo was smashed to smithereens and is now just beginning to be rebuilt. He escaped to Turkey, he fled to the country of Georgia, and now he's a student at LCC. He makes all of the sets for our Christmas programs, and he is the most amazing cook. Has cooked recently for our entire board of directors. These are the students of LCC. We have students who are natural political enemies living on campus. Students, by all accounts, that should hate each other to the core. And this is perhaps the harshest reality. When Russia took over Crimea several years ago, on a particular December Sunday, a student at LCC hung a Russian flag. This is the flag story. Hung a Russian flag out of the window in the residence halls. For us, doesn't matter. Russians are welcome here, and Ukrainians are welcome, and Latvians and whoever else. But somebody in the neighborhood around LCC, and Lithuania itself is very jittery about its proximity to Russia, somebody around LCC called the media, thinking that would be the best way to clear up this little issue. They called the media, and immediately that was front page news in the largest online news portal in the country, and it was not a happy story about LCC. It was, what is this university doing, letting the enemy come in from the inside to take over the country? Oh, well, happy birthday, that's a lovely story. And within 2 hours, there were like 1,000 comments online negative about LCC. This was a Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, I called the crisis management team together, and we had to review this situation and make sure the media was back out by noon so that we could clear up the story. Before we had our words even crafted, our students spoke much more loudly than we could have ever spoken. And we didn't even know it was happening. Our students hung all their flags out the windows. And now the Russian flag was together with the Latvian and the Canadian and the Moldovan and the, pick any other country that was there. And the window that made the biggest difference was that one, where that Russian flag was now in partnership with the Ukrainian flag, with the big red lipstick heart in the middle. That is my favorite picture of LCC. That's the LCC that can be a hope carrier to the world. With our alumni, and I want to just read a statement from the young woman here in the blue who is currently working on her PhD at Notre Dame University in Indiana. These three women are all from Ukraine, and here is what the one in blue recently said. I guess I didn't write it here. One of the most persistent problems in Ukraine is the lie of the Soviet past that still exercises its power over thousands of people. It is not just the myths about communism, Lenin, and Soviet liberators, but also the false vision of the world as one in which everyone is out for their own good, where selfishness thrives, suspicion is rampant, excellence is ridiculed, but corruption and decay are praised. But at LCC, we witnessed goodness and love, integrity and honesty, commitment and faith. And that already has broken the Soviet lie into thousands of pieces. LCC did not teach us how to form a Congress, write a constitution, and work out the fiscal and monetary policy, although we might put together the latter after Professor Hinderleiter's classes. But it did provide us with the experience of what a community centered on the truth of Christ might look like, of how human dignity feels, of what the daily life of integrity is, and what human flourishing means. That's not part of a curriculum. That's not part of a list of, okay, today we're going to work on human dignity. This is an ethos that happens when we as Christ followers are hope carriers to the world. We have something different about us just in the way we conduct ourselves. Students notice. Students notice that. And so this is for us at the core of our mission of hope.